Hey guys, I just want to check and see if you guys can hear me.
I can hear you.
Okay, great, thanks.
Hello, everyone. Go ahead, Madam Chair.
Did you have a chance to take a look at what our cost savings actually were for the vacant accounting supervisor and accounts payable specialist positions?
I have not.
Okay, that's fine. I just was curious. I think before we get before the county board, we'll want to probably have those numbers if that's something we want to consider. If there is any funding, I'm assuming there is, that we didn't spend it because they weren't employed. All right, it is 1 o'clock and we have 4 committee members present, so I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. Proof of notification. So I sent this out to the WRCO, the Richland Observer, and Valley, whatever the Valley Editor one that goes to other newspapers. And Clinton sent me a picture of it posted on the bulletin board, so I know that we were in fact properly notified. So item number 3, agenda approval.
Move for approval.
All right, motion by Brewer.
Glassbrenner seconds.
All right, any discussion? It's a 9-point agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we have an approved agenda. Item number 4, minutes from the May 18th, 2021 meeting. I would entertain a motion.
I did not see those in the folder.
I saw them, but I always see them right after the meeting, so I guess I don't know for a fact.
Do you mean they were in the May folder? Because typically we've had the minutes from the
No, they would
previous
be,
meeting.
are they in the June 4th folder?
I did.
We can delay it till the next meeting. That's not a big deal if people haven't had a chance to read them yet. So we'll take no action on number 4 and we'll bring that back to the next meeting. Is that okay with everyone? I'm going to assume yes.
Yes, that's fine with me. I just don't see them in the folder, so I'm wondering if they haven't been put in there yet.
Yeah, okay. We'll make sure we get those in a place where you can read them, and then we'll get them on the next agenda with this meeting.
So thank you.
All right, great. All right, item number 5, discussion with Administrator Langrick on the status of our recommendations that we made for his administrative support staff. Clint, did you want to talk about the finance meeting, or do you want me to just do it, or how did you want to do it?
You can go ahead, Madam Chair. If there's any types of questions or additional comments or concerns you had for me, by all means.
Okay, all right. So at the last finance meeting, we did discuss this particular item, and I mean, Dave and Marty are also on that committee, so please feel free to correct me if I get anything wrong. But the gist of the conversation was that there is absolutely no question that our administrator needs help, and he needs help soon. The discussion focused on 2 points. One was, do we really only want to start with half-time? Do we not think it would be more appropriate and make more sense to just advertise for a 40-hour-a-week position? And the second conversation revolved around the highway department position, whether really not any argument as to reduction in that, but of when the reduction should happen. There was some concern about giving enough notice to the person who is currently in that position, that the hours would be cutting from 35 to 20. And so at the end of the day, what was voted out of that committee that will come before the full board is that we are recommending a 40-hour-a-week position for the county administrator, and that in 2022, part of that money that we would use to pay for that position would come from the hours gained from the highway position. But that during this budget process, we would work to find where else the money would come from to pay for the 2020, the rest of 2021 for the administrator. If he were to be able to hire, let's say in July, there is money that was not spent because the accounting supervisor position was vacant, and also the accounts payable specialist position was vacant. So there are some monies there that can be utilized to cover it as well. Before the county board meeting, we will have all of those numbers available, so we will know exactly how much of a deficit we would be creating this year if we did hire a 40-week position, from July to December of this year. There was also discussion about the information we've gotten that our general fund does seem to be in very good shape, and so the potential to be able to draw some monies to cover this position could be a discussion. But overall, there was overwhelming support. There was absolutely no one who felt that we shouldn't hire help for Clinton, and there was a lot of support for it happening as soon as possible. So that was my take. If anyone else wants to chime in on that, I just wanted to make sure this committee was aware that it did go to finance and it will be coming before the board, And I do think it would be helpful if everyone from this committee and finance were vocally supportive of this position.
Melissa,
Yes, please.
one of the things brought up in that discussion was if you advertise it as a 20-hour position or as a 40-hour position, you might get different people applying. Someone might be reluctant to apply for 20 hours when they need a 40-hour position. So we need to decide that before we go ahead.
Right, and it's clear that he needs a 40-hour-a-week position. It's not like that person won't be overly busy even at 40 hours a week.
Right.
So
Right.
yes, thank you for that addition. And I have to pause the washing machine. Hold on.
What was the title of the position?
Clint, do you have the title of the administrative assistant position?
Is that what it's called, administrative assistant? I just couldn't remember if we
Right,
had
yeah.
settled.
I don't know, have we come up with an actual title from Carlson Detman? I know we came up with a pay scale, but
I can bring
And-
up the position description here to review.
yeah, I think it was an assistant to the county administrator, perhaps?
I believe so. Here, let me pull it up.
Yep. So assistant to the county administrator seems to be the title we're working with at the moment. Did you have any concern with that title?
No, I'm sorry. No, thank you. I just was,
Okay.
I just couldn't remember.
Okay, all right. So is there anything else, any other comments that anyone would like to make as far as this coming before the board? Any concerns that you think we should be aware of to try to prepare for answers for from board members?
I think the biggest question is going to be where's the money coming from?
Right.
I think we're also going to get a few people. So you're hiring. Does that mean we'll still see the pay raises that have been talked about? I think some
Right,
of those
yep.
are topics that are going to come up.
Yep. Yeah, and those were all conversations that were had in finance. So yeah,
Good.
it's
All right.
definitely in the forefront.
Those were the only
Okay.
two things that hit me.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? All right, with that, let's move on to item number 6.
Madam
Oh.
Chair,
Yep.
there's one more consideration. If you just put it under your hat, and I mentioned this to Clinton, don't forget the technology needs of a new hire.
Oh, as far as a computer, so there will be additional costs. That's a very good point. Thank you. If you could, before the county board meeting, just put some kind of rough number like cell phone and computer, I think would be the two big things, right?
Would we get her a
somewhere-
cell phone? We don't do that for everybody. In fact,
Okay,
most-
yeah, I don't know, whatever. Yeah, whatever
Mhm.
you do for
Mhm.
people.
Mhm.
And we will have to be obviously thinking about where this person would actually occupy space. But
Mhm.
let's get the first hurdle done
Right,
before we
right.
worry about. Okay. All right, so on to item number 6. So several times we've talked about office space in this committee, and I've had conversations with Administrator Langrick and Clerk Kalish on the topic of office space. And I just wanted to bring it before you to have a public conversation about what their thought process is about the arrangement they currently have and where they'd like to go. So I think, Mr. Langrick, it'd be easiest if you just want to kind of summarize where you guys are on this, and then I'll take it from there.
Sure, and I think this is kind of a carryover from discussion that was wanted to be had at the last meeting. Where I'm at and where Clerk Kalish is at, discussion we had yesterday. Clerk Kalish is continuing to work through the many records that are in the existing clerk office, the larger office up here. He's making progress on that. Some of the items that will be coming forward is going to be resolution reaffirming our record retention schedule. Once we know what our record retention schedule looks like and what documents are kind of post-purge, it's going to help us in steering the ship on what documents that we can we can legally purge out and which ones we need to continue retaining. That being said, he still has quite a bit of documents that are in there that need to be either purged or codified. So recommending that for the time being, for the foreseeable future, that we continue on as the plan that we kind of had taken up through resolution, that the administrator office will fall into place where the current computer server room is. A reminder that at the last county board meeting, we did pass resolution to purchase a new AS400 system. When that new AS400 system is received and is up and running in the new over at the Health and Human Services building and climate control, that'll free up the server room then for myself to transition into that space. Now, that being said as well, now we're anticipating with the arrival of an assistant to the county administrator position, that assistant position, that we'll likely configure that position now next to the current clerk's larger office in anticipation that once records are codified, coded, purged out, and the volume of papers that we have storage room diminishes down, that in the near future or the mid-range future, whether it's a couple of years to several years, then there would be a transition for the administrator to move into the larger office and it potentially becoming an administrator office with a meeting room also capability. So if that makes sense, the short-term plan is I'll still occupy the computer room. Clerk Kalish will operate out of the larger room while we continue the purge and codification of records, and then post those actions, then potential for a switch to have that become an administrator / conference type room, and the clerk assume the current computer office. Does that answer your question, Madam Chair?
Yes. So my only concern with this is I hate to see something drag on forever and ever when it really is our intention that we make the clerk's current office into the administrator's office. So I guess one of the things that I would recommend, if the committee feels it's important, is that we could potentially, the action we could take today is that we set a time to reevaluate this. And I mean, I was kind of thinking that maybe we reevaluate this before this committee is disbanded, which I believe right now we are through December 31st of 2021. And so we could just make sure that this is one of the last things that we revisit to make sure that progress is in fact happening and that the intent is still to make this transition, or we just leave it be and let them work it out amongst themselves. Committee members?
Do we have cost questions as to any construction? Quinn had mentioned a conference room, tables, chairs, technology. Do we have any cost ideas that might help us set a date or a better time frame?
In regards to the actual rooms and equipment, it's going to be minimal. I guess we're planning on using existing furniture that we have right now. Future furniture needs might be built into future budgets. There are expenses, though, that we're anticipating in regards to the codification of the records. I believe Clerk Kalish has multiple vendors that he's in communication with to see what it would take to scan, codify, and have our ordinances and our resolutions available on a web platform.
Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
Madam Chair. Yesterday I spent, I and you spent time in Clint's office during a meeting. And as I looked around that office, I could see that there's a lot of space in there that is taken up by files. And that just raises the hackles on my back of my neck to see all that wasted space, in my opinion. I think that's a worthy endeavor that the clerk, Derek, and Clint are undertaking to see what can be, I would say, digitalized. But I also think there's probably a lot of stuff that maybe we don't need to keep anymore. And I realize that we think, oh, we've got to keep, statutes way back to whatever. I mean, I keep remembering the tour I took of the courthouse a few years ago, and or a year ago, and we were looking for office space for Clint, and I saw that room up there, the floor almost caving in, with file after file cabinet full of court stenography records. I'm thinking, my God, you know, there's got to be things that we can get rid of, and I would recommend that we refer this to the Rules and Resolutions Committee, probably is the more appropriate place to just to undertake a whole cleaning out of our closets and but in particular this office, so we can be reconfigured. I think it can be a nice space if we get the stuff out of there.
Mr. Langrick, I believe that you a plan to bring forth a recommendation or to tell us to figure out a recommendation for record retention. I thought you mentioned that earlier, correct?
That is correct. And working with, again, with Clerk Kalish, we're looking forward to bringing resolution or ordinance adopting the state's current record retention plan, but also ensuring that that record retention plan meets our needs as a county. With that in place, then we'll know what can stay, what can go legally. There might be other documents that, you know, we don't have a legal obligation to keep, but in the better, you know, in the best interest of the county, we may want to keep. I'm thinking like one of, I think we have a collection of old high school graduation or class books and graduation albums, which, you know, why are we keeping those? But sometimes I believe those do get referenced when we're trying to prove different citizenships and placements for different things. So there's going to be what we have to retain, and then there may be additional records that are of use to the public that we would want to retain or move off to a historic type of a historic society to have them retain. Madam Chair.
Okay, so committee members
Madam-
are, oh yeah, go ahead.
Madam
Supervisor
Chair,
Glassman.
yeah, I'm sorry. My internet has been cutting in and out a little bit, so I apologize if this was covered and I missed it. Did we speak about, is there a time frame, like an approximate time frame for this digitizing that we were speaking of Clerk Kalish doing? I realize that might be difficult.
Right, so it was requested of Clerk Kalish, I don't know if it was at the last rules or the last finance, but at one meeting that he look into vendors and find out costs associated with it. And then at that point when we find out about the cost, then I think we will also start talking about time frame of how quickly something, if you're paying someone to do it, how fast can they do it? And so we'll know more coming up.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Turk, go ahead.
Yes. I just wanted to say how much I appreciate the cooperation happening between Clerk Kalish and Administrator Langrick. And as much as we'd like to see this get done as quickly as possible, I think we need to make sure we're supporting their efforts and making sure that they're able to do it in the way that makes the most sense to them.
Absolutely, I agree 100%. So my only question is, you know, do we want to just check in 6 months and see where we're at, or do we want to just let them work it out and go from there? I don't have a preference. I guess I wouldn't mind checking in 6 months just to make sure that we are in fact making progress. But I have no doubt that we will be. It's not like I have any doubt in that. So maybe just getting an update before our committee disbands, you know, wouldn't hurt. But I also think that they're perfectly capable of getting this figured out on their own as well. So other committee members, do we no action, just let them figure it out, or do we want to put something on the books as far as report back in and progress report?
Madam
So
Chair?
this is Bob. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Terry Dave.
I was just going to say, I think reports back are nice. I don't know that we need to create a specific deadline, but as we continue to meet, if they could just give us updates as we go along, that, you know,
Okay.
so we know what's happening.
All right. Mr. Frank, did you have?
That's exactly what I was going to say. Took the words
Okay.
right out of my mouth.
All right, that sounds great. I just wanted to make sure that we at least have the discussion. So yeah, all right. So we will let Mr. Langrick and Clerk Kalish work this out. And if you guys could occasionally just kind of let us know how that's going, that would be great. All right, so let's move on to item number 7, review and make changes to the rules of the board documents. So Mr. Langrick, I'm actually going to bring up my version of it. And as people talk and we make revisions, I'll just make the changes right here, so you don't have to try to do it from your notes. Does that seem reasonable?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, all right, so if everyone wants to open up, and I don't know if you want to put it on the screen or not, but you want to open up that document. So I think we can handle it kind of like we did the last one. So we'll start with rule 1. I didn't see anything in there that needed to be changed in regards to the fact that we now have a county administrator. I'll let Clint get a second here to get it pulled.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was just going to ask if that could be pulled up because I'm actually using my iPad for the WebEx.
I know I'm using my laptop. It's the one downfall of having a meeting on the same device. You need to look at documents. Okay, so can everyone see it now? All right, so I didn't see anything in rule 1 that I thought needed to be changed. And so anyone just stop me if you when you read it, you thought there was something that I didn't change that should change. So I didn't see anything in rule number 2 or 3. Rule number 4, it was just a typo that I corrected on my version. I guess, do you want to page down, Clint, to rule number 4? That was I just changed an it to an if. So that I don't think anyone cares about. I didn't see anything in rule 5 or 6. Oops, I did. Rule 6 is where we get the first changes. All right, so this is talking about an absence of a supervisor. So, and again, I wasn't sure if we want to change this from board chair to administrator, so I did it, but that's why I assume we're having these conversations is to determine what the will of the board is in this instance. So it used to read that in the event of a prolonged unexcused absence of a supervisor or citizen member of a committee, board, or commission, the chair of that committee, board, or commission shall notify the county chair, board chair, of the absence, and I changed it to administrator. Since I believe by statute, and Mr. Linger, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe by statute, technically the administrator has the authority to appoint committees, certainly. Boards and commissions get more complicated because they have some of them have specific rules about who appoints. But is this the language we want, or do we want to leave it board chair? I guess I need input from the committee.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Brewer.
Did you say there were no changes to Rule 6? Because Rule 6.
No, this is Rule 6. I'm sorry, I misspoke. This is Rule 6.
Okay, just a continuation of Rule 6. But in the first part of Rule 6, it talks about who makes appointments, and it's the chair, according to Rule 6.
Oh, right, I missed that at the top. You're right.
So we've got to change that if we want to.
You are correct. I totally missed that.
I personally, since this talks about board supervisors in this, I personally feel like it should be left as the board chair. But that's I'm definitely willing to hear what other people have to say.
Well, Mr. Linger, can you clarify what is the language in the statute giving you authority to appoint? Do you know?
Yep, I have it pulled up right here. Let me find out which paragraph is it. 1 second. So 5918 2CC says appoint the members of all boards and commissions where the statutes provided that such appointment shall be made by the county board or by the chairperson of the county board. All appointments to boards and commissions by the county administrator shall be subject to the confirmation of the county board. So the state statute authority is specific to boards and commissions. And I remember having discussions with Attorney Southwick, I think, who had chimed an opinion on this at one time, is specific to boards and commissions. At the same time, by county board rules, if the county board wants to designate that responsibility onto the administrator to include committees, that would be that would be something that that you'd have the authority to do by county board resolution.
So can I ask your opinion? Do you like the way we currently are doing it? Whereas you make recommendations to the committee on committees and they either affirm them or not, and then we send it to the county board. Does that process make sense and we should leave it alone, or in your opinion, would it be easier to be modified?
Madam Chair, may I speak to that?
Oh, sure, of course.
When we first began with our administrator, it was the intent to, I think, to shift all appointments to him. And but as we've worked through this process, it's becoming apparent to me that the county or the county board chairman ought to retain the appointment responsibility for committees, because, and it's certainly in working with the administrator, but there are times when, well, how should I put this? There are times when the administrator needs to step away from committees and appointments and let the chairman of the board take the heat, so to speak. What do the rest of you think?
I'll go first. I mean, I do feel like this is something that we certainly don't need to put on his lap. There are so many other things that are, I think, deserve more of his attention than working out these things. And I at this point, I feel like we could leave this alone and let it stay with the way it is, and taking some of the burden off of the county administrator. But I'm not sure what other committee members think.
I would, as I said before, I would vote to leave it alone.
Supervisors Turk or Frank, do you have thoughts on this particular section?
I would say leave it alone as long as it's not putting us in conflict with state statute.
Right. So boards and commissions would Attorney Southwick say that he thought committees were also included in that, or did he think that committees were a separate entity and not specifically stated in statute?
Madam Chair, this is Administrator Langrick. My recollection from it was that Attorney Southwick found that it was specific to only boards and commissions and that there wasn't an authority by the administrator to appoint for a committee. In practice, my experience has been where at this point in where Richland County is with a relationship with the administrator position, I still value having a committee on committees for the sake of not, there's the aspect of it where I don't necessarily know all the people and personalities that are applying for positions. So it's nice to have a sounding board of a committee for it. I guess that can be a good or a bad thing, depending on how your view is of having a more of a third party kind of view on it. The other part of it, though, that I do appreciate is that we're able to discuss these things and have our differences of opinions at a committee on committees level versus having those discussions on a county board floor on occasion. So if we can work out most of the kinks and figure out if there is going to be county board support for it at a committee level, where we're at with our relationship with an administrator position, I find that of value.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and delete these changes then and leave Rule 6 intact as is based on everyone's comment. Does anyone object to that? Okay.
No objection.
So, go ahead.
Objection. That's a good idea. That's a good plan.
What?
That's a good plan.
Okay, thank you.
He likes it. He likes it.
Sorry, he cut out there for a second, so I couldn't hear him. All right, so I am officially deleting these, rejecting these changes in my document, so they will revert back to what it said before. Okay, so then moving on to Rule 7, I didn't see anything in there, or Rule 8, Rule 9, Rule 10. So I didn't see anything until you get down to Rule 14, I believe is the next section where there's some questions that whether we want to change some things. So the first one that I saw was The following items must be approved by the county board. A, contracts would be the first thing. So this is something that I have heard through the last couple of years, on different committees, a little bit of frustration about how long the process can take to approve some of this stuff. So I didn't know if we wanted to streamline this a little bit and just have, if it's a contract less than 5,000, if we want it to be approved by the county administrator and then he informs the appropriate committee, or if we want to leave it alone. I know that we've been trying, part of the idea of this was to streamline how the county operates in whatever ways we can. And this was one where I thought potentially we could streamline.
My concern with this is I like the language the county administrator and the appropriate committee, because I think the appropriate committee would have to know what the contract is and is about before we go to the county administrator, wouldn't they?
Yeah, I'm not even sure like how many contracts come up. Well, I guess that's not true. I suppose we had some mowing. I don't know. One of the things that I've thought about is if something is already specifically budgeted in a department's budget, why are we approving that? We already approved it when we approved the budget. So why do they have to get more approval for something that was already approved? Unless it's a different amount, like if it would go over what they had in their budget, or it's a change, then, or it wasn't in the budget, certainly. That's one question I've always had is why are we making it to us when it's something that they already put in their budget? Yes, Supervisor Burr.
Chair, there are more considerations though than cost when we look at approval. Oftentimes it involves vendors. We have to get bids and choose the appropriate vendor. So that's a consideration that the board must continue to have, I think.
So is there a requirement that, I think they would still get the bids, but is there a requirement that we have a public discussion of those bids? Is that, that seems appropriate to me. That well, actually seems a good reason.
I think the public discussion would occur at the committee level. And,
right.
You open the bids and review them, or you look at the vendors who have bid. And then, that could bubble up to the county board. It doesn't have to, but it could. And that would still be a matter of public discussion, I believe.
Okay. So would we like the language to just remain what it was? So it's just approved by the appropriate committee? Or do we want the county administrator to be involved at all in this, or is this something that we can also take off his plate? Mr. Langrick, do you have a feel for how involved you would like to be in this kind of a decision making?
In context of the contracts, the proposed language changes on here, just to make sure I'm correct, is involving less than $5,000. So if it's a contract with expenditures anticipated over $5,000, you're still taking it through the county board. Right. Some of that bleeds into paragraph C when we start talking about a contract for a public work project and it reaches the thresholds of 20,000 or such. Then there's a whole, the whole compliance issues with that and specification design and all those types of things. So I guess from my administrative perspective on contracts less than $5,000, it's typically items that are going to be in an approved budget or in which there's going to be an appropriation that we're going to have to go through some type of a committee thing potentially if it's not budgeted. So there's going to be transparency that way. I would see this move as being beneficial administratively.
So adding you to it is okay. Is that what I understood?
I would say if you're looking to streamline it, remove appropriate committee and have all contracts less than 5,000 approved by the county administrator would be a thing to consider. Again, it comes down to how much oversight and transparency though that you want to ensure.
Okay. Madam Chair, I have a question for Clint.
Yes.
Clint, the project I think that you were most involved with on a day-to-day basis was the courtroom, the big courtroom redo. Would a change here have helped streamline that process?
I don't remember all the bits and pieces of it, but I know a lot of the multiple of those contracts would have been over 5,000, which we would have still had to bring back through the county board. But for smaller types of items, yes, that would help expedite things. We'd still be looking to follow up to make sure that you folks are aware of where your monies are being spent on items, but it helps us move the contracts, move the projects without having to wait for an appropriate committee meeting on when the next one might be scheduled. You know, could be anywhere from a few days to a few weeks.
Well, maybe we need to bump that from 5 to 10,000. If we really want to streamline things, what do you think?
Madam Chair?
Yeah, go ahead.
Supervisor Brewer is suggesting exactly what I was thinking, that if our interest is truly in streamlining processes, then we should give more leeway with the administrator involved acting as our oversight to be able to expedite things so they don't have to wait for the county board to rubber stamp a $7,000 door replacement or something like that.
Right. As we know, things are getting more expensive.
Right, and
Yes.
presumably, if it's something that he's uncomfortable with, the administrator is going to say, no, we need to bring it to the committee, right? I mean, he would have that authority to not approve it until committee input, correct? Supervisor Glassbrenner, did you have any thoughts on this?
I like the streamlining suggestion. I think it only makes sense with what our objective was, and at least part of our objective in hiring a county administrator.
Okay, so,
Question.
Yep, Supervisor Frank,
So
go ahead.
the language I'm seeing here says all contracts involving less than $5,000 a year. So is that when I read that, I was thinking this is some type of like a monthly contract that goes for a year, that so much is paid out, they can't go over 5,000. Or is this just for any $5,000 project? This almost looks like it's every year there's like a maintenance contract. Is that a $2,000 maintenance contract for the next 10 years? Is that considered part of this?
I can answer to that, Madam Chair.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I would see this is the contracts on, we're looking to do a project that requires maintenance services. It's less than 5,000. The authority is to maneuver on it, to take care of damaged wall, damaged ceiling, something of that nature, that we can have the ability to maneuver on that without requiring committee action. And then, like you had just mentioned too, if we're looking to lease a large printer scanner, if it's underneath $5,000 a year, that we can maneuver on that without having to bring it up through a county board action to lease equipment and establish different contracts for purposes like that.
So what do you think of the language of increasing it to $10,000?
I'm comfortable with that because it's still going to come down to, does the department have the money for it? And if they don't have the money, where's the money coming from? And then when we start talking about if money's coming from other types of departments, then I'm very squeamish as an administrator, and I'll be coming to different committees to figure out if we need to do reappropriations from different funds. You still have language in there that says fund transfers require Finance and Personnel Committee action.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and then I'll read it, and if you have any objections. I am changing the $5,000 to $10,000. And so the sentence will read, all contracts involving less than $10,000 a year must be approved by the county administrator, period. Department heads may not enter into any contract on behalf of Richland County. Copies of all contracts shall be filed with the county clerk. Is that how we want it to read?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
If we're doing that, then do we also need to change the 5,000 in the lines above that to 10,000 then?
Let's see.
Where it says all, right above that, it says all contracts involving an expended.
Over to, yep, you're right. You're correct. Thank you for catching that. So $10,000. Okay, so let me read that paragraph. Let me just read the paragraph through, just make sure we're in agreement. So contracts, agreements entered into on behalf of Richland County should be reduced to writing whenever possible. All contracts involving an expenditure of over $10,000 a year must be approved by the county board, except that a 1 year's extension of an existing contract may be authorized by the appropriate committee. Sorry, does that need to say county administrator or leave that with the appropriate committee?
Like appropriate committee, if there's an extension, I think that committee should know what's going on.
Okay. All right. So then continuing, all contracts involving less than 10,000 a year must be approved by the county administrator. Department heads may not enter into any contract on behalf of Richland County. Copies of all contracts shall be filed with the county clerk. Is that how we want it to read?
Madam
I think
Chair,
just a,
I'm sorry, I'll defer. I'll wait till members have had a chance to speak, Madam Chair.
Okay. Was that Mr.
Madam, I was just make a point. We need to make a technical correction because the way it's worded, a contract of exactly $10,000 falls into neither of those provisions. So contracts involving an expenditure of $10,000 or more a year must be approved by the county board would be my suggestion.
So in the second sentence, all contracts involving an expenditure of
$10,000 or more.
or more, instead
Yeah,
of
that way,
up-
if it is exactly 10,000, you know, with the suggested wording, it was
Right.
over 10,000, and then the other wording was under 10,000. There was this black hole of exactly 10,000.
Right, right. Yeah, we don't want that.
Nope.
And then am I correct in understanding we are taking out the words appropriate committee on the all contracts less than 10,000?
Correct. I could add language saying approved by the administrator, who will then inform the appropriate committee as necessary or at their next meeting, or we could add that loop in there where he would just make sure everybody knows.
Madam Chair,
Yes, go ahead.
I think the intent of that word, the wording being there originally was that was the approving body. I don't think the intent of eliminating it is to take them out of the process. It's just saying they don't have the authority to approve it. The administrator does. I would imagine whatever department head is looking for that contract to get signed going through their committee, because there are budgetary considerations. There is keeping your oversight committee updated, all that.
So in your opinion, we can leave it with county administrator period and not have any other language?
I would tend to think so.
Okay. I mean, again, we've heard the county administrator, his intent is certainly if there's anything of question or anything that, he would certainly involve the oversight committee, and presumably the department heads would always at every time there's a committee meeting, their oversight committee meeting, that they would be reporting this information to them.
Just speaking from, thinking future-wise, it's different administration. If the appropriate committee is no longer the approving committee, I guess I could foresee scenarios where it doesn't become something that's just routinely updated simply because you're no longer bringing it for approval. And I could be wrong. I just am wondering if we think, I don't know. I guess I'm just a little hesitant. I don't know if we need language in there that specifically states that or not.
We could say department heads will report the contract to their oversight committee at their next meeting.
Clint had a comment. I'd like to hear what Clint was going to get.
Go ahead, Mr. Langrick.
Madam Chair, thank you. I was only going to make things further complicated. In paragraph 14A, the second to the last sentence reads, department heads may not enter into any contracts on behalf of Richland County. I would like to offer that we change that to say that department heads may enter into a contract on behalf of Richland County with county administrator approval, for two reasons. The first one is that this matches up with our management authorities, kind of our cornerstone policy that we had. One of our authorities and responsibilities that we wanted to in the future delegate to management was to contract for goods and services. The other part that I like about that is that then my department heads kind of own the contract language, and they have skin in the game to make sure that the contracts are properly reviewed and they're taking ownership of a final contract, Madam Chair.
So if we add that language, then I would definitely be in favor of Supervisor Glassbrenner's suggestion that we have specific language saying that the committees will be informed. just making sure that the department heads know they have an obligation to keep their committee informed if they're entering into contracts with your approval. Does anyone else have thoughts on that?
I like it.
Okay, so it would, let me just write something quickly here and then I will read it back here. So I'll start with the second sentence. All contracts involving an expenditure of $10,000 or more a year must be approved by the county board, except that 1 year's extension of an existing contract may be authorized by the appropriate committee. All contracts involving less than $10,000 a year must be approved by the county administrator. Department heads may enter into any contract on behalf of Richland County with county administrator approval. Department heads will report all contracts to their oversight committee. Is that how we want to say it? To the appropriate committee, I guess.
So I like the appropriate committee.
Yeah, that's the language we're using in the rest of the document. So, okay, so then it reads, department heads may enter into any contracts on behalf of Richland County with county administrator approval. Department heads will report all contracts to the appropriate committee. Copies of all contracts shall be filed with the county clerk.
Madam Chair, I think this is maybe nitpicking, but I think instead of saying into any contracts on behalf of Richland County with county board approval, or with county administrator approval, maybe a contract, or I don't know, any just seems, now that we're changing
free will, yeah, like free will to just do whatever they want.
I mean, I know it says with approval, but I just think maybe not any.
Okay, so now it would read, department heads may enter into a contract on behalf of Richland County with county administrator approval. I actually like that language. It softens it a little bit. Anyone have any objections to that language? No? Okay, so I'm going to read this one more time just to make sure we're all on the same page. All contracts involving an expenditure of $10,000 or more a year must be approved by the county board, except that 1 year's extension of an existing contract may be authorized by the appropriate committee. All contracts involving less than $10,000 a year must be approved by the county administrator. Department heads may enter into a contract on behalf of Richland County with county administrator approval. Department heads will report all contracts to the appropriate committee. Copies of all contracts shall be filed with the county clerk. Are we satisfied with that language?
Sounds good to me.
Okay, I'm going to move on to B. So this is again where I had, you'll read my comment there on the right saying, talking about, is this something we want to go through the county administrator instead of the appropriate committee of the county board? And this is again what I was saying before, is if it's something that's already in the budget and it's with, it's going to be purchased exactly as budgeted, do we really need them to go through the committee process and take up to, depending on when it falls, it could be 4 to 6 weeks sometimes, but before things can get approved all the way through. So I guess I'm interested to hear other people's thoughts on this. Nobody?
This isn't exactly, oh, I'm sorry. Madam Chair.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, sorry, I thought I heard Marty as well. This doesn't exactly pertain to your question, but I'm just wondering, when was the last time that these dollar amounts were updated? Do you have any idea?
I don't. Administrator Langrick or Supervisor Brewer, do you guys remember?
Madam Chair, this is Administrator Langrick. I believe it was within the last, I don't know, maybe it was in the last year we updated the thresholds of, I think, 1,000 to 2,000.
It was about 2 years ago because I was chair of rules and resolutions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are you, Were you thinking that perhaps these dollar values should be increased again?
No, not necessarily. I don't have enough of a framework to know what's reasonable. If it was within the last 2 years, I'm good with that.
2 years ago, we increased it from 1,000 to 2,000.
And the 5,000, has that been the benchmark for a long time, or did we change that one too from 2,000 to 5,000?
That one's been a benchmark for a while. We discussed it at that time, but we didn't move on it.
Okay.
That's a long time, yeah, Mark. So does that 5,000 need to be changed to 10,000 to match the previous language?
Well,
I believe so.
Yeah, I mean, this is expenditures, not contracts, but it's the same idea. I mean, to me, there's two separate things here. One is if it's a budgeted item, then I don't see why we have to do this at all, personally. But if it's not a budget item, then yeah, I think, probably 10,000 makes more sense because a lot of things are over $5,000 that we end up having to purchase.
Madam Chair, where is the language that gets to accepting and advertising for bids, going through that process?
That's in
Does
a
that come
different,
up later?
that's in a different rule.
No.
Marty, you're not talking about the minimum of 3 quotations?
Yeah, I am.
Okay,
there.
because it is right
Yeah, it is
after
in
county
there.
administrator.
It's in the middle of the paragraph B.
B.
So it says quotations, not bids necessarily, but
And I
Madam
think
Chair,
that rule was crafted in compliance with state statute.
Madam Chair, can I give you my thoughts on it?
yes, please.
I guess I'm in favor of, if we want to expand more authority, with the mindset that we have established budgets and there's going to be a check and balance through an auditing committee, through myself, through my office here, that's going to be saying, well, where did this purchase kind of come from? I guess I would feel comfortable again in trying to expedite our expenditures on purchasing equipment, that consideration of changing the $2,000 threshold for a department up to $5,000, for then maneuvering a range of $5,000 to $10,000 at the control of the administrator, and then $10,000 purchases and above going to the county board. Maybe a consideration at this point when we're going through it. We still have to go through a resolution process to purchase a piece of equipment of $5,000, which in my opinion, and the monies that we're dealing with, perhaps is a little bit excessive on how much we're getting on it, but that's not my call. That's your call on what you want to know. It's just, I know we do quite a few resolutions that are on items that are just over $5,000, where I'm not sure if it's worth your time at the county board level to know about those types of things, but that's your call.
I'd sure like to see our agendas diminish in size, so I'm all for that.
Right. I mean, I guess I'll play a little bit of devil's advocate here just for a second. Is, okay, so if we want to be transparent, if one of our strategic goals is to be transparent, does this in any way, because we would not be having these conversations at the committee level and for sure not at the board level, does this in any way make us less transparent about how the money is being spent? And I'm just asking this as a question. I don't disagree with what anyone's saying.
Madam Chair, I can speak to that again, and that's a good question. I would say you still have a check and balance from an auditing committee that is going to review on purchases, and if they raise red flags with them. And that would, anything then underneath $5,000 would be kind of handled administratively without a public meeting. From a $5,000 to a $10,000 range, then you'd have myself as a check and balance on ensuring that those expenditures are happening appropriately. Again, that wouldn't happen at a public type meeting again. That would all be administratively handled with an audit committee still as a check and balance. And then at your expenditures of 10,000 and over, then yes, you'd be going to a county board, which by our other rules then would require a supervisory committee to offer resolution for it. So it'd be hitting a committee or a commission board or a committee on its way to county board. Madam Chair.
Madam
Okay.
Chair, may I ask, how often does our auditing committee meet or go over things? I don't really know how that process works.
Audit meets once a month, the third Monday of every month to go over the bills.
And so when you guys go over bills, what does that look like? Are you actually going over line by line items, or?
We are going over packets of bills broken down into a few different categories. Some of it's payroll, some of it's departments, and we're going over that and signing off on that. If we have questions on some, we take them up to the clerk's office and is this a good? Is this approved? What was this for? Sometimes the language is vague as to what it's for or whether there was a contract in place for it. So we have to ask further questions.
Thank you. I guess my only other comment on this would be that I feel like, I think what you asked, Melissa, is good. I think what Mr. Langrick said makes sense to me. In my opinion, something that seems important to me is I would agree with Mr. Brewer, Chair Brewer, that the minimum of 3 quotations, and I know we say if reasonably possible because there are occasions when that's not possible, but I just feel like that is really important to make sure that we are actually seeking out what are appropriate bids on things that we are going into contracts, especially if we're no longer going to be necessarily being informed or going over these on a committee or a board level.
Okay, so I guess what I would like to, which dollar figures are we proposing to change? The first sentence is the purchase price of the needed property, including computers, is $2,000 or less. The department head may make the purchase upon obtaining at least one quote. Are we suggesting we change that number to 5,000? And do we want any
suggestion?
Madam Chair?
Yeah, go ahead.
Madam Chair, that was a suggestion from myself that did not come from any of your members.
Okay.
I would agree with that. I guess, Mr. Langreck, do you think that if we're doing that, do we need to change because now that says only at least one quotation. Do you feel at $5,000 that we should be having more than one bid?
There's kind of 2 aspects to it. It's the first one is sometimes it's trying to find like specialty type items that we might have. I'm thinking back to like a recent radiator purchase where it's sometimes hard to find specialty type things that you're going to find multiple bidders that have those products that you're trying to get. At the same time, yes, if you're trying to ensure that we're trying to find the best deal on the county's dollar, then that may be an appropriate thing to consider is, to expand that out for a lower amount. I get that. Where this is kind of a little bit of a tangent, but we're trying to get things lined up to accommodate for some of this through like Amazon business type of account when we're putting out 4 bids and trying to find a product where you're getting multiple vendors that are showing you what their prices are to cover some of that. So yes, if you want to up the authority and the discretion for administration to make purchases, and you want to balance that then with ensuring then at a $5,000 amount that you're obtaining 3 quotations and that gets transferred to the earlier line items, I'd say that's a fair exchange.
I mean, we could include the same language where it says obtain a minimum of 3 quotations from vendors if reasonably possible. So if it is truly a specialty item, then you couldn't get more quotes, and then it would still be covered that if you only got 1 quote. Okay, so I'm just minimum 3 quotations if reason from vendors. Okay, if possible. All right, so I'm going to read that. It will now read. If a purchase price of the needed property, including computers, is $5,000 or less, the department head may make the purchase upon obtaining a minimum of 3 quotations from vendors, if possible, if reasonably possible. Do we want county administrator to know about these or no? I mean, are you saying you don't need to know if they're gonna make anything less than 5,000, you don't need to know about Administrator Langrick?
That's where I'm at. And I guess too now with, the more, if we're gonna, that's gonna extend all the way down to a minimal type of a purchase of sticky pads. Now, do we have to find 3 quotations from a vendor on purchasing sticky pads?
Right, and I didn't think about this, that this is not necessarily coming to the county administrator. So what's the purpose? I mean, who's going to be following up on whether or not anyone is getting 3 quotations or not if this is not coming through, if there's no approval necessary? I think that was why the at least 1 quotation was in there before.
And, Madam Chair,
Yes.
this gets to know one of my other concerns is that we don't have a central purchasing division or policy, even a policy for the county. And maybe this gets to that. Shouldn't we establish no department should go out on their own and purchase paper products. It should be purchased through a central purchasing department, and perhaps Administrator Langrick has that on his list to-do items, I would guess.
So just to get a definition here, this says property, needed property, including computers. I mean, I don't interpret that as office supplies and paper, that kind of stuff. I interpret this as, kind of major purchases. How is this interpreted by departments, Mr. Langrick?
We don't have a purchasing policy as of yet. It's on the thing on our to-do list of having a finance and purchasing policy. And those things are appropriate to understand kind of what the mechanics are going to be at some point. I guess in context of trying to streamline thing, if you just want to take a first step today and at least transitioning a $2,000 to a $5,000 amount of limit to a county administrator helps with a lot of different projects. If we want to up the amounts, that kind of helps streamline even more projects, regardless down the line. And as one of our strategic goals is to have a policy in place where we actually have a finance and purchasing policy to try to address more in detail and to have procedures.
Madam Chair, Mr. Langrick, didn't I understand though that the purchasing policy, etc. on the list, wasn't that deferred? I know that was one of the goals or the objectives, and wasn't that one that was postponed, I guess is the correct language.
Yes, it is. It's still on the list, but it's something that we're shuffling to the back at the moment.
So I guess with that in mind, and with what Mr. Brewer said, I guess considering the fact that these things are not, if we change that first line and it's not going to the county administrator, I guess my thought would be maybe to leave that first line alone and simply increase the amount on the second numbers. So for example, from 2,000 to, I think Mr. Langrick said 10,000. I would feel more comfortable with that since we do not currently have a purchasing policy or a finance department.
Okay, sorry, I'm just trying to undo what I made changes here just to see. Okay, so what it would read then, so the first sentence would stay the same. What happens though between 2005, if we up the next number, what happens between 2,000 and 5,000? I feel like we had this issue before where we had some ambiguous language.
Between 2,000 and 10,000?
Okay, so what you're suggesting is if the purchase price of the property, including computers, is 2,000 or less, the department head may make the purchase upon attaining a minimum of at least 1 quotation from a vendor. If the purchase price of the needed property, including computers, exceeds, is this where we want to say $5,000?
No, I think you leave that then at 2,000. You just increase the 5,000 to more.
Oh, to 10. Gotcha.
And that was only my suggestion. I want to hear from the other board members on that.
Right. All right, so let
I
me
agree with
oh,
yeah,
go
that's
ahead.
fine. Without having the understanding of the purchasing process, yeah, changing that too much until we get something like you said, the sticky pads and those little things. It's still ambiguous, but changing too much at this point, I think, is going to cause us more problems down the road. I agree going to the 10,000 though, not to exceed 10,000.
Okay, and so then the second part of that, so let's just say we agree on the leaving the 2,000 but upping the 5 to 10. What do we want? Do we want up to 10,000 to just be approved by the county administrator, and then over 10,000 is when it would go to the committee and to the board? Is that what we want?
Yes.
That was my understanding.
Okay.
I believe the exact amount would be $10,000 or more going to the board, consistent with what we did before.
Right. Three quotation in excess of 10,000. Okay, I'm just trying to fix the language here. $10,000 or more. Okay, so it would read the same sentence as this. The first sentence is the same. The second sentence is, if the purchase price of the needed property, including computers, exceeds $2,000 and does not exceed $10,000, the purchase must be made by the county administrator after having obtained a minimum of 3 quotations from vendors, if reasonably possible. No committee may commit Richland County to an expenditure of $10,000 or more for the purchase of property, supplies, or equipment in either one unit or in multiple units if the cost of either exceeds $10,000, or of real estate, or for repair, renovation, yada, 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 without the expenditures being approved by the county board. Is that where we're at?
With the changes in it, Madam Chair, it sounds like then it would be the administrator may not commit the Richland County to expenditures in excess of $10,000.
Instead of no committee. Yeah, right. I didn't change that language. So
I have a question on that though. Are we still wanting that, I guess, more streamlined where it would go directly from the county administrator to the county board? And are we bypassing the appropriate committee entirely? Or are we saying it's a $10,000 amount that it would still go through the committee and then on to county board?
right, it would have to go, because we have another rule that says we can't bring something to the county board floor unless it comes through a committee.
Then is this language too ambiguous? Because he's saying that the county administrator, which I agree that that's who would do that, but I don't know if we need to add in, I don't know, maybe I'm making this too complicated.
And approved by the appropriate committee and the county board? That last sentence? Unless that expenditure has been approved by the appropriate committee and county board.
Yeah,
I think
that does it.
And
Mr. Langrick, were you saying something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, in practice, where everybody that's on board right now is in tune to, in order to get a resolution for consideration, it has to go through a committee. That doesn't mean that everybody's going to stay in the same seats, and it might be interpreted later down the road. So if you wanted to firm that up, I think the practice then remains the same.
okay, so I'm going to read this just one more time. If the purchase price of the needed property, including computers, is $2,000 or less, the department head may make the purchase upon obtaining at least 1 quotation from a vendor. If the purchase price of the needed property, including computers, exceeds $2,000 and does not exceed $10,000, the purchase must be made by the county administrator after having obtained a minimum of 3 quotations from vendors if reasonably possible. The county administrator may not commit Richland County to an expenditure of $10,000 or more for the purchase of property, supplies, or equipment in either one unit or multiple units of either exceeds $10,000, or of real estate, or for repair, renovation, remodeling, or reconstruction of buildings or other public works, unless that expenditure has been approved by the appropriate committee and county board. Are we good?
Mhm.
Okay, I'm going to assume quiet means good.
That's good. Takes me a bit to get unmuted here. Sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay. All right, so item C, do we need to change anything in here because we just changed? Oh, this is highway though. This is public works. Do we want to change any of these numbers? again, in the mindset of streamlining because of the county administrator. Chair Brewer, do you have thoughts specifically on this as far as where we want to be as far
Well,
as
I'm not familiar with section 595229 of the Wisconsin statutes, but maybe further on it'll clear up here.
yeah, I don't know there either. Are these rules coming straight from that statute? So we really don't have a choice. They tell us the numbers.
I think that's probably
Let me
right.
look at it. Let me look at it quick, Madam Chair. I think it might be 25,000 by statute. I think we operate underneath that as kind of a safety net, just to ensure that if the project bleeds over a little bit, that
Oh,
we're
right,
not.
that we're still in compliance, that we got.
I think yep. I think that's why we do it this way.
Okay, so I would suggest we leave this alone then, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, and here's another, so are we okay with skipping ahead to item D then?
Yes.
This is that I've definitely experienced myself. I mean, I never understood at all why we wanted grants to be approved by the county board, but then someone brought up that, you know, there might be a granting agency that is somewhat controversial, or there could be cost sharing that people aren't paying attention to, and all of a sudden the county's on the hook for some, you know, some costs that we weren't planning on. So I understand the reasons why we do want some sort of oversight of different departments applying for grants. But my thought is that could be streamlined pretty effectively by the county administrator, by the granting applications going through the administrator's office, with the idea that if anything controversial came up, that he would, at his discretion, then bring it to either a committee or the full county board. Does anyone have any?
I think that could be handled by adding wording that simply says, if it's a grant that doesn't require a match, or if it's a grant that is not establishing a department or adding employees, then the administrator can handle it.
I would support that as well.
All right, so let's see. I was just trying to think of how to word that. If said grant requires a match or the addition of personnel,
There you go.
then it would need to be approved by the county board.
Right.
Is that?
I like that. I like that.
All right, so let me just. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to write it. If the grant doesn't require a match, or if it does require, if the grant requires a match, matching funds requires matching funds. Sorry. Okay. So it would read, let's see, no department or county government may undertake a program initiative or contract with or apply and accept a grant with the state of Wisconsin or with the federal government or with any other entity without the approval of the county administrator. If the grant requires matching funds or the addition of personnel, then it would be approved by the county board.
Right, Melissa, and I would add matching funds or in-kind match, of some artful wording there, because sometimes they say, you guys can do the work.
Match or additional personnel. Okay, got it. Everyone okay with that? All right.
Yes.
Silence again means good. Okay. All right. E would be emergencies. I didn't see anything there. Surplus property. I don't know if we want it to stay with the supervising committee or if we want it to be the county administrator. I really don't have a feeling either way on this one. County Administrator Langer, do you have any thoughts on surplus property?
The last examples included, I believe, that raised attention was like some of the antique chairs from the courthouse, and feeling okay that we can put those up for surplus on my discretion. Another one that kind of came up that is always talked about is the squad cars, or the last two
Yeah.
examples I have here.
So were you okay with handling that, or would you prefer to just let it go through some, I don't even know what surplus property, does that go to that property committee?
It kind of depends on, I think we've kind of parceled it out to the appropriate committee. I'm thinking too, like we had Simon Center sold some matting. There's involvement sometimes through finance and personnel though, because our language here says that the money goes back to the general fund. And
right.
sometimes the departments are looking to have proceeds from the sale go back to supplement their budget, Madam Chair.
Right, yeah, I know that I wasn't going to tackle that language in the particular meeting. I didn't think that necessarily had to do with the county administrator, so I left that alone.
But I have no problem, and I think it's appropriate that it's liquidated by the administrator by the best means, or with the administrator's approval.
And removing the supervising committee? You're
Well,
okay with?
If we could put it to maybe liquidated by the department with approval of the administrator by the best means possible. That way it's not kind of just falling on myself and my office for posting and figuring out how to auction it.
So it would read, if no other county department has use for the surplus equipment, it is then to be liquidated by the department with approval of the county administrator by the best means possible. Anyone object to that language?
Nope, that sounds good.
Sounds good.
And Madam Chair,
Yes.
on behalf of the Pine Valley Board of Trustees, we would like to thank the LAJC because we just took delivery on the old squad car down at Pine Valley. We're going to use it down there. So thank you.
Well, there you go. Well, good deal. What's left inside a squad car once they take all their equipment out? Is there even a radio?
I don't know.
Probably shouldn't thank them, Marty, till they drive it.
Yeah, right?
Well, I did caution Tom about accepting gifts. And
yeah,
nothing comes free. Nothing comes free, I told him.
All right, so then item G. So again, I don't know if this is appropriate, if this is what we want, but I just added in the language that, budget issues, fund transfers go through the county administrator, who will then report it to finance committee and if necessary to the board. Or do we want to have those things go straight to finance? Administrator Langrick, what's your thoughts on this particular one?
When we're doing fund transfers, I still think it's going to be appropriate to have finance and personnel committee involved with that. And I think that matches up with their language underneath, I believe, the committee structure document as well. The county administrator who will report, that's appropriate that I'm in the know on it. I don't think we can tweak this too much more, and you're going to have constraints too statutorily on how much you can put on the administrator position, because if we some budget issues, if we're doing a budget amendment, then requires action from the county board. So as amended here, it seems appropriate. I have involvement. We're still going to finance and personnel committee, and if necessary, then we go to the county board. So it's appropriate to me.
So, okay, I'm okay with it. I guess I don't know if maybe it is more streamlined just to go directly. Everything would go directly to finance and personnel.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
So, Mr. Langrick, if I'm understanding you correctly, you're saying that there are some things that statutorily are required that finance and personnel approve. Is that what I'm understanding?
Not statutorily. Statutorily, there's items that the county board would have to take action. If we're doing a transfer on a sum of money that would go from one function or one department to another department, we would have to do like a budget amendment, and that would require county board action. For transfers within different funds, if they're not, if they're kind of like how we have things where their funds aren't necessarily designated, like a Fund 75, and to use those funds by another department, then we take it through finance and personnel. So as written right now, to the best of my knowledge, is in compliance with state statute, and I also feel it helps bring that transparency aspect that I think is appropriate when you start looking at transferring the money from funds, as we line those up at the beginning through a budget process.
Is it covered anywhere else that there are things that have to have county board approval, or is that just understood? I guess because my question is, and this may be my newness to the language in these types of documents, but my understanding of just report to would mean it's simply a discussion, not necessarily an action item. Am I incorrect in that?
I'm not sure if I understand you correctly, but I guess how I'm reading it is the transfers must go through myself, and then I would report those transfers or the desire for those transfers to Finance and Personnel Committee. And if necessary, then it would go on to the county board, is how I interpret it. So I'd still see that the Finance and Personnel has authority on items within, that don't require action by state statute. And then this matches up, I believe, with our committee structure document that gives the authority for Finance and Personnel to do fund transfers.
I think that Supervisor Glassbender, what your concern is that do you think it reads that budget issues and fund transfers go through the county administrator, and he could make a decision and then he would just report to the finance committee what he did, instead of the finance and getting a decision?
Right. That's, to me, and again, I said I think this is just partly my newness to the language. So I guess I'm asking, like, technically speaking, that would be my impression of the language that I see here, but I could be wrong. And I'm just wondering, when we're getting into things like budget amendments or something where we do actually have to have approval, do we need that stated? Is that just understood, implied?
Right. No, I actually had the same thought, because reporting is different than getting permission from, right?
That's where the rub is for me, I guess.
So I'm just trying to think of a different word. Like, if there's a way we could phrase it so it makes it clear that the administrator will bring it to the finance committee for approval.
That, though, is then we get into splitting hairs, because there are probably some budget issues where it doesn't require approval, correct?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Well, this has to also go to the rules committee, where, they could maybe mess with that wording some to clarify that too, if we can't come up with a way to say it. I could put in a comment.
What about adding something like for approval if required? I don't know, if required or if necessary.
Report to the finance committee.
I don't know, maybe that's too ambiguous.
I'll put in a comment just saying, make sure it's clear that needs approval from F&P. All right. Or something. We can have further discussion.
I do see Sean is on. I don't know if you wanted to hear his opinion on that or not.
Supervisor Murphy Lopez, are you interested in commenting on this?
Sure. I've just been listening the whole time. I don't know if this really helps with the discussion, but my only question has been, what is a fund transfer and what's not a fund transfer? I think I heard Mr. Langreck say something about between departments, but sometimes even a department will have control of a couple different funds, and they'll ask permission to move something from one of their fund numbers to another fund number. And it's been unclear to me, maybe others on the committee and on the board understand it better than I do, but it's been unclear to me, using this rule, what is a fund transfer and what's not a fund transfer. So I think there's some needed clarification from my standpoint.
Do you think this whole item, we need to do a little more defining of what exactly we're trying to say in this particular line.
Yeah, and I think if Mr. Langreck and the other financial staff, you know, could clarify this for us, you know, what they think it means or should mean, I think that would be helpful.
Okay. So I'm going to insert a comment on this because this is obviously going to go to rules next. So I'll insert a comment about this conversation that we're having, and that way we can continue the conversation there as well, unless someone else has language they'd like to propose right now.
Madam Chair, if I can make a comment
Yes, please.
In referencing the Finance and Personnel Committee structure underneath their paragraph K, one of their authorities and responsibilities, and I'm not trying to say this clarifies it completely, but just so as a point of reference on what we're looking at when we try to also kind of meander through the gray areas, is under paragraph K, it says, make fund transfers between budget lines within the budgets of individual departments or committees in the annual county budget. So that is an authority and a responsibility task to Finance and Personnel Committee by committee structure, Madam Chair.
And
Okay.
Madam Chair, if I can just add one example that made me question what he just read, was that Mr. Rislow told us at a recent Finance and Personnel Committee meeting that Pine Valley could make fund transfers on their own between their debt service fund and their capital fund. They didn't need to get any approval from any other committee or body. It was just the board of trustees that could do that. That's what started bringing up the question in my mind. What is this fund transfer thing all about? What authority, where's these gray areas? I think that's what needs some cleaning up is my opinion.
Okay. All right,
Perhaps the two, and I know that you guys are going to discuss this later, but perhaps the two items should be separated. The all budget issues, which is ambiguous in my opinion. I mean, but you know, it could maybe stay that way. But if fund transfers have to go through Finance and Personnel, perhaps that needs to be a separate line that states that.
Okay, I'll put that in the notes too.
Madam Chair,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I have to jump off here at 2:30 for a call I have to do.
Okay. I still have Supervisor Frank and Brewer, correct? And
Yes.
okay.
Right.
All right, good. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I've got comments in here about clearing up this language as far as the approval needed from Finance and Personnel and potentially separating out the budget issues and the fund transfers to further clarify. All right. Sorry, I'm just making sure I got it all.
And Madam Chair, as I'm sitting here thinking, I mean, I'm aware of situations, for instance, over at Health and Human Services where the desire has been, and I'm not sure if we allowed it or not, but to use unused funds from a prior year to be carried over into a new year and as a different budgeted item. So I think this whole situation requires further scrutiny.
Okay, so I will put that comment in as well for Rules Committee to dive into deeper. And so that was funds, leftover funds.
Unused funds.
Carried over, right?
It would be like rollover funds, correct?
Can they be carried over? Can they?
Here. Okay, I got it. All right.
Not, can they be a non-lapsing fund? That's really the question.
Right. Lapsing versus non-lapsing. Yeah. Okay, so Rule 15, I didn't see anything. Rule 16, when you get to B, this is just a comment on my part. I've just heard that and I don't disagree, because you can hardly even eat at McDonald's for $20 a day. That this is something, so I just was going to leave a comment in there that this is something that rules should take a look at while they're reviewing this document. I don't know that it necessarily has to do with our county administrator, but and then Rule 19, again, this doesn't necessarily have to do with our county administrator, but this is, I don't know if we need to include language about how, right here it says we're signing the resolutions at the county board meetings, but that's not actually what's been happening. So again, it was just a comment from me that should be updated. Doesn't necessarily have to do with county administrator. Rule 20, I just fixed a typo. And that was all the changes that I had. Did anyone have any other areas that they thought needed to be changed to accommodate for our county administrator?
Nope.
Okay,
The-
go ahead.
No, I didn't have anything from what I kind of scanned through it, so. you got
Okay.
What I said.
All right. So Clint, I made on this document all the changes, so I will send this on to I guess now we would need to go ahead and make a motion if we are so inclined. Sorry, just let me get to my cover sheet here. So I think that there is a motion in order to take this document with our suggested changes and refer it to the Rules and Resolution Committee. Would anybody like to make that motion?
I will
I'll
move.
make the
This is
motion.
Bob.
I'll
I have a
second.
motion by Bob, a second by Brewer. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? All right, we will go ahead and send that on to the Rules and Resolution Committee. And I'll take care of that, Mr. Langrick, since I have it here. I'll make sure we get it on the agenda.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, so with that, we are at item number 8. So proposed future agenda items. I know that, and I'm not sure I told everyone on the committee, but it turned out that the employee handbook that I had when we made the changes and suggested changes was not the most recent version. So I do need to go back through and just get the most recent version and try to put our changes in there. There was some question as to if some of our stuff might have contradicted with changes that had already been made. So an unfortunate mix up that we had with what versions of documents we were using. So that's one thing I know needs to come back for our just to, I guess it only needs to come back if there are things that we change that contradict with what had already been changed. So if it all works out fine, then I won't bring it back. But if I go through it and determine that there's some things we need to talk about again, I'll bring it back. I'm not sure what else we need to be talking about. Does anyone, are there other issues that we have not addressed, I guess is what I need to know.
There may be, but we don't know what they are at this time.
Right.
So I would suggest we keep this committee. I think we have a sunset of December, is that right?
Yes.
This year?
Yeah.
Well, why don't we just maintain that and adjourn to a meeting that can be called upon the chairman's prerogative.
Okay. Right. Yeah, I mean, because we were formed to do a few things. One was to determine office space, and we're still working on it, but we have done that. One was to determine staff, and we just made our final recommendation for staff, unless we think that we need to talk about more staff. But I think we have done this, and if it doesn't pass county board, then it will come back to us as we try to determine how we would get staff for him. And then, updating documents. I would like to go through our ordinances and resolutions and make sure that we don't have any of those kind of out there that contradict the county administrator's role. But unfortunately, we don't really have a way to even know what they are until Clerk Kalish can get them scanned in and searchable. So I think that's something we could tackle towards the end of the year as we start getting things scanned and online and searchable. But we've done the employee handbooks, we've done the committee on committee structure, we just tackled the rules. So yeah, so I think I agree with Supervisor Brewer that we will we will adjourn to an unknown date, and I will call a meeting when we have the next issue that comes up, if that is agreeable to everyone.
Sounds like a good plan.
Yep.
All right. So
Yep.
with that, item number 9 is adjournment. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I can make that motion. Glassbrenner.
Okay. Motion by Glassbrenner, second by,
Second.
all right, second by Frank.
Sure.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? All right, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Be safe.